Hi folks, a little mini episode here on the back of the Final Fantasy IX playthrough, which finished yesterday. This is another. We're back to the tier list, as you will see on your screen right now. It's yeah. I thought what we'd do is we would update the tier list based on our findings from the recent playthroughs, so both Final Fantasy IX and Fire Emblem Three Houses. I don't think I need to move any of the others. I'm quite happy with their positions. So we're back here. If you've come straight from the last tier list video, you may notice some of the box art has changed for one or two of the entries. That's it's on me. I deleted the files permanently when I did it the first time. So some of them, if you look at Baldur's Gate 3, that's been lovingly cropped to try and make it match the original, while Dirge of Cerberus has just basically been dumped there. So yeah. So basically, we'll have a breakdown now of where we feel about the games. We're going to start with the most recent one, Final Fantasy IX. Because that has been an experience. If you haven't watched the playthrough, then good for you. It was an incredibly salty experience. When I placed that in B tier as part of the tier list, I was tentative, to say the least. The playthrough was not fun. I think it wasn't Wizardry 8 levels of saltiness. Jesus, no, I don't think anything will ever touch Wizardry 8 on this channel unless by some miracle somebody wants to pay me to play Final Fantasy X too. Or pay me an awful lot to play Dirge of Cerberus, but I think I'd rather just throw the PlayStation 2 out of the window at that point. Yeah. So Final Fantasy IX was, we discovered from playing it that is a incredibly slowly paced game that is not hugely involving for the player. You know, I mean, some of the boss fights were okay, they were like relatively tough, but you still spend the vast majority of your time not doing anything, and lines of dialogue take forever, and the soundtrack isn't as good as its neighbouring, 7 and 10, and I'd actually go as far as saying I don't think the soundtrack's as good as 8. I've if we put Eyes on Me to one side, I don't really have a problem with 8's soundtrack. I think the soundtrack's good enough. It's the characters that get in the way. But yeah. So I thought what we'd do is we'd look through the tier list, and we'd start from bottom up and see. I'll spoil it for you now if you're watching. That playthrough did not convince me that this needs to go up a tier level. It was not great. So we'll start from. I think we'll start from E tier because, as bad as it was, I enjoyed it back in the day, and there are bits I enjoyed. It'd be completely disingenuous to compare it to G or F. So let's sit it for now in E tier and say, is Final Fantasy IX better than the games in E tier? The first thing that's like absolutely leaping out here is that I haven't completed any of the other games in E tier. Not one of them. And for that reason, whatever else my complaints are about Final Fantasy IX, you can't put it in E tier. It has to be. It drew me in enough to complete it when I was young. I finished the playthrough a second time, so I've completed this game twice. You might argue the second time is a little bit under duress, but for that reason, I don't think it can be an eater. What about D-tier? So there's lots of games here that I've completed. I've completed Fable, I've completed Fallout 3, I've completed Dragon Age, I've completed Morrowind, and all the other games here. Oh, I've completed Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. I don't know if these have moved a bit, but yeah. So the D tier is reserved for games that really either were like a sort of a mixed annoyance that got as many things wrong as they got right, or for games that I was just kind of sort of like, nah, it's okay. Final Fantasy 9, I'd say a lot of things about it. I wouldn't say it's like meh. I would not. I think it would be ridiculous to put it in the same category as, for example, Fell Seal or even Fable. You know, like it doesn't feel like a throwaway experience. So I think with that element of it, it's doing okay in the D tier. The question then becomes the sort of Dragon Age, Persona, Morrowind question of like, did it annoy me more than it gave? And it annoyed me a lot, Final Fantasy IX. I have been seriously frustrated with that game at times. I wanted to get through it. I still maintain that the 5 highlights of like the playthrough, 2 of them were story moments, 1 of them was getting out of Alexandria, and then the other 2 were like finding out that we'd got through a disc and we were on the next one. I don't think that's a good sign. It reminds me I mean, it's not, but then again, I mean, you look at like the Final Fantasy IX has got pacing problems. It's got huge pacing problems. I really think it gets in the way of the storytelling. But if we were to put it next to Persona 5, like, its pacing problems are just absolutely dwarfed by Persona 5. And if we compare the mechanical frailties, I think Dragon Age has just got like much worse, you know, much bigger problems with that. I thought for long periods of the playthrough this was going in D tier, because it gets so many things wrong and it's so annoying, it's so frustrating. Like the combat, you know, just make it turn-based if you want it to be turn-based. Like, don't pretend to be an ATB system when you're not. Like, just so slow. It may yet end up in D tier. We're gonna trial it in C tier and see how it goes. When I look mechanically at the other games here, Final Fantasy IX has the worst gamer involvement of anything in C tier. Darkest Dungeon, you constantly like engaged in the primary gameplay loop. Wasteland 2, you are. Valkyria is maybe not constant, but you are, when you're in it, it's a very strong primary gameplay loop. The Icewind Dales, Persona, Might and Magic, such as it is, you know, Fallout and Knights of the Old Republic too, as I recall, both involve you more. So it wouldn't seem to be a natural fit in C tier, which would pull it back down to D. But the thing is with Final Fantasy IX, the 2 things I'm going to say, despite all, you know, you might have watched that playthrough and thought, God, Kjaa really hated that game. I don't hate Final Fantasy IX. I hate elements of Final Fantasy IX. I hate parts of it that it does really badly. But there are also parts of it that it does quite well. And something that you don't really see in C tier and below. Like, when I look at those games, it's one of the core things, I think, and particularly if you're doing like a character-driven narrative game. Like, did I feel something? Did I feel for the characters? Did I root for the characters? Did I get emotionally invested? And however it came across in the playthrough, I did. You know, like Final Fantasy IX, I wasn't into everything that Zidane said, but I still backed him as a character. I do like Garnet. I am 100% behind her as a character. Even like Eiko, Vivi is not as good as I remembered, but I still wanted him to succeed. And I can see why in my first playthrough, why I really loved Final Fantasy IX and why it was at one point one of my favourite games of all time. I also think that there's certain games on this list in the higher tiers, and I think it matters when you look at. I mean, for different reasons, it's true of Fallout and Fire Emblem Three Houses, but focusing on Final Fantasy VII as a character-driven narrative, the Final Fantasy VII is arguably a better story the second time you play it than the first. It is incredibly well threaded to be a fascinating experience and really emotionally effective experience the second time. Knowing what has happened that you don't know on your first playthrough, and the level of foreshadowing and implication of scenes, really, it's one of the reasons why it's a top tier RPG. Final Fantasy IX isn't doing that, and it makes the second playthrough harder. But I can see how the first time I played it, I would have been very, very invested in it. And because feel matters, it's better in that sense than something like Icewind Dale and its sequel that made me feel nothing. Like those games were just like, you know, combat puzzle after combat puzzle. And yeah, I was playing the game more, but I didn't feel as much. Is it in its original spot of beta? I think it was here, wasn't it? You see, you've got three games there that are sort of sat next to each other. You've got Disco Elysium, you've got Final Fantasy X, and you've got Final Fantasy IX itself. Disco Elysium is only there by virtue of its writing. The gameplay elements of Disco Elysium are poor, but its writing is so exceptional it pulls it up. Similarly, Final Fantasy X has like problem mechanics all over the show, but its overall writing, again, that's a game it's got a bit more to it the second time around. Not as much as 7, but it's there. The characters and the writing are dragging it into beat it, because it makes me, and I think most players, feel things. We're in the realms of feeling things now. And like Final Fantasy, Disco Elysium and Final Fantasy X, the mechanics, they're not good, but they don't necessarily get in the way of the experience. And I think Final Fantasy IX has a slightly harder time with that. I think that the mechanics do get in the way of the enjoyment. I don't think the story is as well told as Final Fantasy X's, which even, Final Fantasy X's story's got problems. If you've played it, there's a few bits and pieces in that where, like, that anybody who's played it will remember, where you're like, yeah, not so sure about that game. But a lot of its other things, its more simple devices, it does well. I enjoyed both of them the first time around. And enjoying something the first time around counts for something. Like, with a lot of these games, you don't want to fall into the trap, I think, of disregarding a game because it doesn't stand up to repeated playthroughs. The first time can be good enough, but it's never going to be like anything that's in S or A. I think has to stand up to multiple playthroughs, and I look at that, and yes, we still got to cover Knights of the Old Republic, but I generally feel confident that everything else does. So the question really, Final Fantasy IX is sitting, it's dodged D tier, which I honest to God, during that playthrough, I couldn't believe I was saying this. The other thing with Final Fantasy IX is, like, its ending earns a lot of goodwill from me. That is a well executed ending. When I say the ending, I mean literally like the end sort of cinematics. The final boss rush is not dragging it up. That's got problems, but both in the narrative and in the gameplay. So, do I put you in B tier or do I put you in C tier? That's the question. I think... Ooh. It's tough. It honestly makes me like look at this and I think to myself, God, maybe I should rejig this. Maybe I should have done something closer to an alignment chart for all of these, because it feels very close to Final Fantasy X, and it feels harsh to put it in the same tier as the Icewind Dales. But it doesn't have the characters that 10 has. It didn't make me feel things as often. When I came in here, I was expecting to put it in C tier. I am now having doubts. Um, like, it's just such a strange thing because, like, if you ask me, like, just looking on that list of games that I've played, again, played relatively recently, if you said, "Oh, Kjaa, you've got to do a Might and Magic VII playthrough now," I'd be like, "Oh, okay." You know, you've got to do a Icewind Dale 1 playthrough. I played that relatively recently. Oh, okay. Kjaa, you've got to play through Final Fantasy 9 again. No, not again. But, like, it made me feel things. Is that enough? It's just so weird because, like, there was only really two bits in the most recent playthrough that really landed. The boat bit in Medine Saray and the ending. And, like, so much of the rest just didn't land. I'm going to uncertainly place it in C tier. I think it's got problems, and I don't think it's got enough highs. Like if I compare it to 10, like, the combat is like most, well, the combat really, 10's problems are its, like, ridiculous trash fights, like each character has an enemy they can attack, like, thing, which is just a terrible mechanic, and its boss battles like being, like, just totally deterministic, like, that's really bad. Whereas Final Fantasy 9 has its incredibly slow, wants to be turn-based, but, like, it's still pretending to be ATB effect. And yeah, and then just, like, a lot of randomization that just runs into bullshit, like the death guys, to say nothing of Quena and so on. But Final Fantasy X has, like, a much tighter story experience. When I think about, like, the amount of bad characters in Final Fantasy IX, Quena, Amarant, Steiner isn't always great, and Freya doesn't get, and Eiko don't get explored enough. When you look at 10, that's a really tight party of characters. Everybody's earning their keep. And when I think about, like, the art direction of the world, like, Spira is gorgeous, and it has a really nice way of, like, using the scenes to tell its own emotional story, which Final Fantasy IX just doesn't have. And I think it's got, I'm happier with this being in C tier. I love that ending cinematic, and I've got time for Garnet, Dagger, however you want to call it. But even then, I mean, she's got problems with, like, the whole naming thing is a problem. And, like, the pacing and where that's gone, nah. So, it's a C tier. So that's there. What does this mean for Fire Emblem Three Houses? Because we have also played that, and I was uncertain. Having played Fire Emblem Three Houses for a third time, or second and a half time, I think it's great. I think Fire Emblem Three Houses is, I suppose the phrase you would use is, for something in A tier, is is a modern classic. I mean, I don't know how modern it is now, a couple of years old, but like, to me, it's a modern classic. It's part of the current generation, and it's there. If I had to replay, bear in mind that playthrough was like 150 hours or some shit. If you said to me, Kjaa, you've got to do another Fire Emblem Three Houses playthrough, my first thought is, right, well, I'm going to go Black Eagles, because I didn't do that. I haven't done that in ages. It's not like, oh no, it's like, yes, and I've got a plan for what I want to do. This channel shouldn't be about playing the same game again and again. It's not a Fire Emblem Three Houses channel, and like, trust me, like that playthrough, it's already occupied like a reasonable chunk of the pie chart of videos on this channel. It's a long game, certainly how we play it anyway. So I'm not planning on doing another one of those on stream anytime soon. Although if I do another one, I probably will have it on the channel, because I just find it good content. I look back through those early episodes of playing on Madden, and I'm like screaming at myself now, no, you're doing it completely wrong. But anyway, yeah, it's got incredible nuance to its combat system. I would say, of the games on here, Fire Emblem Three Houses has the best combat system. If you play it on Maddening, like, I think it's the most involved. I love the way that it's like it's firing out these numbers at you. You've got rewards like hitting you from all sides for playing. My only question then becomes, should it be S tier? And I'm afraid the answer for me is no. And it's coming back to that feel thing and the level of storytelling. Like, it doesn't have the level of storytelling for me of any of those three games. It's closest to Baldur's Gate 2, but even Baldur's Gate 2 just like smacks it out of the park, really. And I think if you're going to have an S tier, if you're really going to make a lasting impression, you've really got to be exceptional. But does Fire Emblem Three Houses sit comfortably next to the Final Fantasy VI, the Baldur's Gate, the Fallout, the Chrono Trigger, the Planescapes, the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines of this world? Yes, it does. We're leaving KOTOR, Knights of the Old Republic, out because we haven't yet come to a final conclusion on that. But I think that it is an A-tier game. I think it can sit. There's things that I would change and improve in that, but I mean, there's things I would improve in most of these games. Like Final Fantasy VI is crying out for more of the story that made Final Fantasy VII great. Vampire and Fallout are, I suppose, the same that's true of 6 is true of Chrono Trigger. Bloodlines and Fallout both are just too short. Vampire particularly has some dodgy dungeons in it that are not on the main quest pathline, that are just not earning their keep. I'm looking at you, Sewers level. Baldur's Gate it's got a bit of a shitty start and ending. It's a bit joyless, and obviously Planescape's being brilliant when it takes the time to not be completely up its own arsehole. Yeah, Fire Emblem's great, so I'll do that. These updates, as I say, we will plan to continue them. The tier list is always going to be an evolving thing. We aren't necessarily going to restrict ourselves to playing games that are on this tier list, although most of the time it will be. I'll do the occasional new thing or thing that I'm vaguely aware of, but like I think games for me are a single player experience. Single player games are like when you play them the first time, like I don't want to be like reacting to stuff. I mean, I did it for Wizardry 8. That was fair enough. But it if there's two of you there on the couch, like you don't get immersed the same way as when it's just you yourself. And if somebody recommends a really good game, and there's been a couple of good recommendations come to me, I want to discover that organically. So most of the time, what the things I cover on here will be games that that I've already played, and that I sort of have an idea of what we're looking to take from them. The final thing before we go, in episode 1 of the tier list, I made an assertion on that Tim Kaine, the lead designer, developer, programmer on Fallout 1 and actually on Bloodlines, and he was Fallout 2 for a little while, as well as other involvement in several other games in this list. I said that Tim Kaine on his channel has said that he wouldn't include the Final Fantasy games as RPGs because they don't involve you creating a character. And I've since watched another video of Tim's where he clarifies this slightly, or is clarified the word. I misinterpreted what he was saying, and he was saying that being able to create your own character is one of the many pillars that make an RPG. And when you take away that pillar, it starts to be less of an RPG. And I think that's something I find compelling. It allows me to still include the Final Fantasies, but I see the point that if you can't create your own character, you're losing something. And all the other, like the JRPGs on this list, to me are all very clearly JRPGs with the Dirge of Cerberus is there because being basically just putting the boot in at Square Enix with that. It's a cheeky insertion, just to make more wider points about the Final Fantasy series. If you heard that on the tier list, apologies, and apologies to Tim if you're watching this for misquoting me. I'll probably put a comment on that first video. I think is probably the appropriate thing to do. Thank you very much for watching. It's gone on longer than I expected, as these things always do. I will see you next time. Over.